Hey, so this is Carmel and this is your daily download. You can go to www.beingandbecoming.life to find out more about the container I can hold for you as you explore yourself through these tumultuous yet hopefully healing times that we're finding ourselves in. Yeah, interesting times, hey? Remember the Chinese proverb that says, may you live in interesting times. Well, here we are, living in interesting times. I personally am, I've been sitting here just in sort of the pre-download place, sort of feeling into what wants to be downloaded, and when I pressed record nothing was really very clear yet. But I'm but I'm feeling into what's true and present for me at this time, and it's grief. There's so much grief within me and around me, in the field, in the world, at this time. Can you feel it too? There's a heaviness and a sadness to it, and a despair and a disbelief, and a grief. It's such an intense, deep grief. And grief is a very uncomfortable emotion, isn't it? It's a hard emotion to feel because it's so bottomless. It can be so bottomless and so, hard to navigate. And what I've been feeling inside of me is, in a personal world, I left California a year or so ago now, and a whole different level of grief when it's a whole community, when it's friends and family, when it's ways of being, when it's the kind of nature, Mother Nature, that I had on my doorstep there, different compared to what I've got now. When it's to do with the personal side of the changing of intimate relationships and the view of self that you have of yourself in a certain context that's different in another, like who I am as a couple compared to who I am as myself. It's just different, and there's different faces of self that you grieve through that. And I'm noticing as a woman, I'm grieving the end of my maiden, who gave way to the mother, who very quickly gave way to the crone. And the mother and the crone now simultaneously sort of riffing with each other for who gets to show up. The mother is just in her infancy here. My kid's only 4.5. And the crone is very new as well. And it's very interesting to then look into the self and go, well, who am I? Who am I now? Who am I now I don't live in that country? And who am I now I don't do that role of the freedom that was there when I was the maiden or the wild woman who was not attached as a mother? And something emerges from within us when we go, okay, so I'm grieving this phase of life, or this person, or this way of being, or this lifestyle, or this environment, or this home that I no longer have, and I've got this new place. And it's not saying that anything's better or worse, or it's not I wish things were different. It's just like, well, here we are in this new environment. For some of us here in New Zealand, we can't do certain things that we used to be able to do very easily, and others are just sort of going, oh good, we're getting back to normal. And there's a bit of grief in they're like, no, you just see things completely different to me, and that means we can't connect the way that we used to be able to connect. There's an elephant in the room in so many conversations that can't be addressed, or that has to be just pushed to the side to keep the peace, you know. Or if it does come up and you speak about it, then there's grief as to how the conversation might have gone before the elephant was born. So I bring all this up because it leads to a certain level of dis-ease in the field, within yourself, inter-relationship-wise, inter-environment-wise. There's a dis-ease that then happens, and when there's that level of dis-ease, that means you can't easily flow as yourself and as who you are in the world. Then there's that and you can sort of have a conversation where you can go so far in a certain direction and you're like, oh, there's the wall, can't go past that. And so you come back and you say, I'll try a different angle and I'll just talk like this, and so you get to this other point, you're like, nope, there's the wall. And so you go, all right, let's try that. And you talk a little bit in this direction. Okay, let's just see how this goes. No, okay. And so then you're like, all right, let's try a whole nother tack. And you're like, let's just talk here. And what if I try this, that, and the other, and I'll talk from blah, blah, blah. And you find there's another wall. And next thing you know, this is the box that you can communicate in. This is the box. And sometimes the walls are, you know, they're quite a bit further out. And there's a lot of room, and you don't really notice that you're in a box because you're pretty comfortable in this box, and it helps you explore enough that allows you to feel like you're exploring what you came here to explore. But at some point, the box is too small, and there's conversations that are happening on the other side of the walls of the box that you kind of want to bring into the fold. But in the community you're in, or the relationship you're in, or the environment that you're living in, there's a certain amount of resistance that comes from outside of yourself. And that's when the box suddenly needs to change. And that's when a whole layer of grief comes up. And we find ourselves exploring grief in a way we're like, but I want to smack those walls down. I want to smack them down, I want to push them out, and I want to see what's on the other side of the walls I've been living in. And when we start to explore what's happening on the other side of those walls, we start to go, oh, who am I here? I haven't explored myself on the other side of these walls yet. And then there's a whole layer of uncertainty that arises that you go, I don't really know myself in this context. And all the people and the dynamics of relationships that was happening that now can't happen in the way that they end up dealing with their own levels of dis-ease about how to then relate, because you've changed, you're different, and that makes them feel uncomfortable in a way that they're not really sure they want to be dealing with. And so this is where we get into this tricky kind of conundrum as to how do we navigate the changes that we're making inside ourselves as we start to explore ourselves in new ways, when that's shifting the dynamics for other people in ways that we're like, oh, now I've got to deal with their shit as well. That's where we've got to redefine our boundaries. What box do we want to work within now? It's nice to have a box, right? Let's call it a container for exploration. And every now and then we just push the walls out a little bit more. The trick is to find what's important for you and what helps you express yourself the most. Because when you're flowing as your authentic, truthful expression of self, other people, even though they might go through their own levels of dis-ease, they find their new balance, their new equilibrium, or they leave, you know, or you curb yourself a little bit and moderate yourself and see how long that works for. And at some point you're like, yeah, no, can't do that. So if you're in this and you're trying to navigate this tricky terrain, that's where I've been working for a while now, is the interdynamics, the interrelational dynamics of what happens within yourself and amongst yourselves that you're working with in relationship. I'm going to cut it there. I'm at the top of my 10 minutes. I told myself I'd never go more than 10 minutes. www.beingandbecoming.life. If you would like to reach out, we can do that work together.